When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. How are you, Kieran?
All good. Today I'm in Manchester, as part of my magical mystery tour. I'm never quite sure where we're going to be recording from, but yesterday was Brighton and today Manchester, and last week it was Liverpool. So keeps the listeners excited, I'm sure. Not.
Yeah, it keeps me excited, Kieran, as I always look forward to seeing what particular backdrop we have today. Because I'm still half convinced that you're in a little studio somewhere completely remote and with a green screen, and you just go, right, I'll do hotel wallpaper today. I put that up behind me, and now today I'll do Brighton. Every now and again, I just hope you might turn up and you'll be under the ocean. It'll just be fish swimming behind you. It's news day, Kieran. We've got a lot of news to get through, so we should crack on. You're in a place in Manchester. It's all slightly echoey, but I think our listeners can deal with that. Producer Guy will wave his magic wand. Now, our first story, Kieran, and I'm going to preface this by way of a plug for a big interview we have tomorrow with Mark Ives, who's the head honcho, the general manager of the National League. And we started our interview with him talking about their brand spanking new broadcast deal. And now the WSL have got a brand spanking new broadcast deal of their own.
That's right. And I think it is reflective of the increased interest in the women's game. We're going from a position where we're currently generating around about £7 to £8 million a year to £65 million over 5 years. So that's substantial, more than a 50% increase in an environment in which broadcasters are being careful with their cash. You've only got to look to see what's happened elsewhere around the world. The French deal collapsed. There's been no increases in the other big countries as far as Europe is concerned. Even the Premier League domestic deal itself is of no more value in 2029 than it was in 2017. And that's with the Premier League handing across many more matches. So in terms of this deal, and I think they've got the balance right. One of the concerns, I think, of people that want to see an expansion in interest in the WSL is that if you put it purely behind a paywall, that's immediately restricting the number of potential viewers of the product. So it's a joint deal between the BBC and Sky. Sky have very much got the main share of the matches. They've got the rights to show 118 matches a season, some of which will also be broadcast on the BBC at the same time. The BBC's got 21 matches, so presumably they'll be going out at appropriate times. I still personally feel that there's an element of an opportunity lost for those people that want to see football at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon on television. But that's a broader discussion to be had in terms of the blackout, and I think the men's game has to come into play there as well. And any matches which are shown neither by the BBC or by Sky, those will be shown on YouTube. So effectively, we've got 100% coverage. So those are the positives. The downside, or the potential downside, is that if people get into the habit of watching WSL matches, what's going to incentivize them to get off their sofas and physically go and watch the matches in a stadium, especially when the stadiums themselves are not necessarily the ones you want to go to. So if you're a Chelsea fan, getting to Kings Meadow, pain in the backside. If you're a Brighton fan, they're playing mainly at Crawley Town. There's very few reasons to want to go there. So that does have a negative impact upon the physical attendances. So that's sort of the counterbalance. But I think it is a sign of belief in the women's game from the broadcasters. Because it's easy to do the talk, walking the walk in terms of coming up with a significant cash injection is another matter. And by the time you factor in the production costs as well, it's a total investment of £100 million over 5 years. And it's an opportunity for the women's game to build a broader audience for those people who want to see what's on offer.
Don't let Romesh Ranganathan hear you talk about his beloved hometown of Crawley like that. And in particular, don't let his mum hear you talk about Crawley like that. You'll never hear the last of it. She'll get a 6-part series on BBC Two out of it. You mentioned a figure there, Kieran. When we spoke to Mark Ives yesterday for the interview that we broadcast tomorrow, which is a really interesting interview, I asked how much the broadcasting deal was worth. He was reluctant to tell me that because he said it was private information for commercial reasons, etc., which I understand. Then I asked how the money would be distributed, which is a question he was only too happy to answer. You seem to know how much this deal is worth. How will the money be distributed, though?
Yeah, under the way that the women's game operates, it's a 75-25 split between the WSL and the Championship. The EFL would give their right arm for a similar split in terms of the men's game. But my view was that ship sailed in 1992 when the EFL clubs, when they were offered that deal, stuck two fingers back at the Premier League and says, no, we can negotiate better terms ourselves. And now they are very much getting a buyer's regret or seller's regret or whatever you want to call it. So I think this is more democratic, and that is to be welcomed because generating revenue in the women's game, especially for the non-big clubs, is a challenge. It's great to see some of the fantastic crowds and record crowds which are being announced by clubs, but that has to be also observed in the context of the prices being charged for tickets are, I think, politest way you can describe them is competitive. And how do you go about increasing prices to something which is more market related? So it's always an issue when you've got a product which is of value. If you're selling it at below that value, how do you then go through that awkward position? So yeah, 75-25 split is my understanding of the breakdown. I think that is appropriate. It will allow those clubs which are promoted from the Championship to have a decent budget in the Championship. So what you don't want is for them to be fodder. They get promoted, they get thrashed every week because they didn't have that much money in the Championship to begin with, and the established clubs in the WSL itself have therefore streaked far ahead.
It's almost like the women's game has recognised that it's important to invest in the lower reaches, Kieran.
That sounds like you've turned into a communist, if you don't mind me saying so, Kevin. Yes, it's amazing how sort of a holistic approach to an issue can be beneficial to all. Rising tide lifts all ships, etc., as opposed to concentration on what's best for billionaires.
Yeah, this is the last time I'm going to plug the interview with Mark Ives. But the moment you accused him of being a communist was probably my highlight, because we can see people now. There's the technology, Kieran. It's amazing. We can actually see the people we're interviewing, and his eyebrows did a proper old-fashioned Mrs. Day eyebrow raise. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I guess I should have guessed it from the MAGA cap he was wearing at the time. that comment wasn't necessarily going to go down particularly well.
For the purposes of legal clarification, Your Honour, Mark Ives was not wearing a MAGA cap.
Purely for comic effect, of course.
Purely for comic, yeah. Well, let's not talk about that. Kieran just proves the one massive fault line in democracy, Kieran, isn't it? Is that everyone can vote, which they didn't think that through when they started that system. In the same way, Kieran, that we've been nominated again for the Football Supporters Association Best Podcast Award, which is fantastic.
It is.
But we'll lose because the Guardian podcast has got more people available to vote. Well, I'm not making any comparison between listeners to the Guardian Football Podcast and people who voted Republican. I'm making a direct comparison. A vote for Barry Glendenning is exactly the same as a vote for Donald Trump, is what I'm saying, Kieran. It's the two big fault lines in democracy: America and the Football Supporters Association Awards.
I quite like the idea of us becoming the Jimmy White of nominated podcasts.
Or even worse for older listeners, with the Mike and Bernie Winters to Morecambe and Wines. That's the real problem. Sheffield Wednesday, Kieran, are a team that have been bubbling under our sort of metaphorical top 10 of clubs to worry about in the last couple of years, and this news doesn't help.
Yes. Fair play, first of all, to the EFL for their decision to be far more transparent than the league was under the old regime. And as part of this, one of the pages on the EFL website is the embargo website, and it doesn't change very often. And that's actually good. The fewer number of clubs under embargo, the better. But there was an addition last week, and that was Sheffield Wednesday. And the reason for that was in respect of non-payment of monies due to HMRC. And the EFL has a pretty good relationship with HMRC along the effects. I think either clubs have to self-report or the HMRC will now report if a club has failed to make the payments on the due dates, and that effectively triggers a reply from the EFL, and they'll do an investigation, and you end up with a transfer embargo. Now, at the end of October, start of November, people will say, well, is that a problem, given that the window doesn't open until January? Well, yes, it is a problem, and the reason why I say that is that although the window formally opens in January, there are already discussions taking place in respect of clubs approaching prospective signings and speaking to their agents and saying, if we could come to a deal in January, would your client be interested? Now, given that the agents know that Sheffield Wednesday are under an embargo, they would probably be saying, yeah, it might be interested, but you're under embargo and we've got a similar offer from another club in the Championship which is not under embargo, and therefore my client is more likely to has a first choice to go elsewhere. And also from a common sense point of view, would you want to, if you had a choice of 2 or 3 employers, would you want to go to one which can't afford to pay its tax bill? Because if it's late with its tax bill, the fear is, what is next? Is it going to be late with? And football is littered. The history of football in terms of clubs being late with player payments is a cause for concern. So it doesn't reflect well on Mr. Chansiri. And I think one of the things we really must stress, ultimately, these decisions are made by owners. Dejon Chansiri is independently wealthy due to the success of his family back in Thailand, and therefore, does the club have the resources to pay these bills? One would imagine so. So it's either been a conscious decision not to pay the outstanding tax bill, or it's incompetence. And it's not for we don't know enough details with regard to that. Or his family's turned the taps off in terms of the money given to him to spend as he sees fit.
Wednesday fans will be worrying if we know how much the money is that is owed, Kieran. Is that figure released in the EFL website?
No, it's not. I mean, one would presume it would be 1 or 2 months of PAYE, VAT payments, but the actual numbers involved wouldn't be available. Given that Wednesday will have a sizable wage bill, you're probably talking £500,000 a month potentially in terms of tax which is due. So that can be a sizable fee, especially if it's backing up over a couple of months.
This episode is sponsored by NordVPN. NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world, which means I don't see any buffering or lagging while I'm streaming football matches or movies. And its threat protection feature keeps me and my devices safe from viruses, malicious malware, and phishing sites, all for just the price of a cup of coffee a month.
Using NordVPN, I can switch my virtual location, allowing me to save money by purchasing flights, hotels, and subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price, or watch sporting events, TV shows, and films which aren't available in my region. For someone like me who travels a lot, being able to access football from back home using NordVPN and a UK virtual location is essential. NordVPN also protects my data while I'm travelling and using public Wi-Fi, wherever I am in the world. On top of all that, I can use one NordVPN account on up to 10 devices.
To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/priceoffootball. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. Withington Town, Kieran, is a football club we've not mentioned before, but sadly, such is the nature of this pod, that the only reason we mention them is that they've got some issues.
That's right. And Withington Town are in the Northern Premier League. And people might say, are we just being sort of trendy liberal types covering all the clubs because all the clubs are equal? Well, I used to live in South Manchester. Withenshawe's a tough area of Manchester, but Marcus Rashford's from Withenshawe. Cole Palmer is from Withenshawe. He's got a fantastic track record of producing footballers. And Withington Town are in the Northern Premier League, and they've been suspended by the league. And the league has said it's due to the club making false claims. Now, in terms of those false claims, what exactly are we talking about? It's because the Northern Premier League has a set of rules, and the aim of these rules is to stop clubs being treated as trophy assets, being acquired by people who then get the club promoted and not pay things such as tax. Again, this is relating to tax issues. Now, I went on to Companies House. There's nothing better to do on the day of the US election, of course. And looking at Withington Town's accounts, the club lost 200 grand in 2023. At that tier of football, that's not good. It's technically insolvent in the sense that it's reliant upon loans from the owners for survival. The club itself is fighting back against the suspension by the Northern Premier League in saying that, well, we submitted the relevant information by digital means, and apparently the league insists that it's got to be sent in physical writing. That's been refuted by the Northern Premier League itself. So there's a lack of transparency coming out, I think mainly from the club here. And it meant that their most recent match was effectively postponed until this is resolved, which is it's not good. We always say that a club, especially at that level, and that was certainly one of the things which very much came out from our discussion with Mark Ives, is that it is far more of a community activity, and people are being denied the opportunity to see the club play. Players are being denied the opportunity to play. It's just a mess. But it does show that it's not just in the Premier League or the EFL or the SPFL where things are taking place which shouldn't take place. and people are taking opportunities to be mischievous, I think is the politest way of describing it.
Yeah, well, if anybody from Withington Town can give us any insight, we'd love to speak to you, obviously. And never mind being trendy and liberal, Kieran, you've come up with the ideal quote for this pod, covering all the clubs because all the clubs are equal. If we can get that translated into Latin and put that on our, that might nick us a few votes from the Guardian. Covering all the clubs because all the clubs are equal. Glendinning and Rushden don't do that. As we hinted in our last pod, Kieran, when we said we'd be talking about Shrewsbury, it's been rather a volatile weekend for that club.
It has. It's not the taming of the shrow. It's always been that's where I've always come from in relation to this particular issue. So I'm taking a Shakespearean approach to resolving the long debate.
Let's not get into Shakespearean pronunciation, Kieran, because we can argue every second word if that's the criteria.
Could actually, yes. So what happened at the weekend, or just before the weekend, was that the owner of Shrewsbury Town, Roland Wycherley, and there's not enough Rolands in football, as we've often said, who's been at the club for 28 years, he offered his resignation. Now, part of that was due to the fact that the club's had a poor start to the season. They sacked the manager at the most recent board meeting. I felt that the owner perhaps felt that he was responsible for the manager coming in the first place and was there, but quite honourably was falling on his sword. But he was persuaded to stay on. That the rest of the board declined his offer of resignation. Partially due to the fact that Shrewsbury Town's losses have increased from £600,000 a year to £3 million. The League One has become, I'm not saying it's as much as a basket case as the Championship, but I've noted over the course of the last 1 to 2 seasons that the level of losses being incurred, especially by clubs who are either trying to have a competitive budget or trying to get out at the top end of the division, have substantially increased. So the owner has said, we are actively seeking new investment. We are trying to find somebody to take over the club. They've moved to a new ground. I've not been to the new one. I used to love going to the old Gay Meadow. As an away fan, it was one of those fantastic towns and grounds, very, very, very English in terms of the nature of sort of lower league football. League One has gone from being stable to unstable in respect of the finances. I think the owner has said, I've done my bit. I'm reaching that stage where I can no longer subsidise the club to this extent, and they're looking for new investment. Finding that successfully is going to be a challenge. Certainly, there's a lot of interest in America still, as far as English football is concerned, and Carlisle has recently been taken over. Crawley Town's been taken over, so there's also interest in lower league football, but getting that deal over the line is proving to be quite a challenge. And I think what's now happened is that Roland Wycherley has said, I'll stay on, but I'm still looking to get out.
This next story, Kieran, about Liverpool and ticket touts is a very interesting one. Particularly the response I've had from so many other fans of other clubs who... without being sympathetic towards the touts, are basically saying, well, this is one of those situations where the club is a tout, as is happening with so many Premier League clubs. I think it's really interesting the way perception is shifting around this story. So talk us through this, Kieran.
Yes, so Liverpool announced last week that they have made 75 lifetime bans and 136 indefinite bans and have closed 100,000 accounts in terms of people who are trying to buy tickets. Now, part of the reason for this is that Liverpool are brilliant. In terms of what you are seeing on the pitch, absolutely fantastic, global fan base. To give FSG some credit. They've increased the capacity of Anfield from 45,000 to 61,000. Every match is a sellout, but it's still impossible to get a ticket, or near on impossible to get a ticket. And the club has very strict terms and conditions in terms of passing on tickets to other people. Now, there is a membership scheme as far as Liverpool is concerned, but that membership scheme, to a large extent, is a lottery. You've probably got a 3 to 4% chance if you buy your membership fee, which I think is probably 20 or 30 quid, if not more. So you've got to pay for the privilege of being able to apply for a ticket, and then you've probably got a 1 in 25 or 1 in 30 chance of being successful. I have been critical of the club in the sense that the expansion of the ground has meant an increase in the number of tickets going to fans who are part of the membership scheme rather than season ticket holders. But there's a perfect case for the opposite point of view. This is giving those fans a greater opportunity. My view, and we are both legacy fans, is that I think somebody from L4 should have, as part of your birthright, is an opportunity to go and see your local team play. But I appreciate that other opinions are available. So that's where we are now. In terms of the point that you raised, that are the clubs touts themselves. This accusation comes from the following observation, especially when there are pairs of tickets available, that what will happen is that if you have a ticket transfer scheme, that the tickets, and I've got no evidence in respect of Liverpool in respect of this, so let's not accuse this club of it. I'm aware of it of other clubs, is that if you've got a pair of tickets and you're a season ticket holder, you can't make a match. So you put them on the ticket exchange. There is a viewpoint that those tickets will effectively be picked up by the club, who will then sell those tickets as part of a hospitality package. So what will happen is, in the case of Liverpool, Liverpool's not got enough hospitality spaces at Anfield itself. So therefore, it might take people to Aintree, and you'll get a sit down meal, or you'll get a pie and a pint beforehand. You'll get an opportunity to meet a club legend. Then you'll get bussed to Anfield, and instead of paying sort of the face value for those tickets, you end up paying 150, £200 a ticket for that particular privilege. It's business. Okay, and it's a horrible thing to say. FSG do not own Liverpool Football Club because they love Liverpool Football Club. FSG have bought Liverpool Football Club because at the time it was a distressed asset. They saw it as an opportunity to increase the value and the wealth of the club. What they've done on the pitch has been absolutely fantastic. We had Ian Graham, who was their director of research, on just a couple of months ago, and he took us through the process. They're very, very smart people, but they're doing it because they are very, very smart businessmen as well. And the value of Liverpool Football Club has increased by a factor of 10 since they acquired the club. Trying to be competitive, their argument will be, if somebody's willing to pay 150 or £200 for a hospitality package, why can't we sell them? Well, this is where the accusation of being a tout arises, is that they're buying the tickets back from the regular fans and then selling them off at a huge profit. What's the difference between somebody who does have a season ticket, can't make a match, and therefore decides to sell it to somebody else, again making a profit?
This is where fans are getting antsy, Kieran. It's because the definition of tout, as we know it, as we grew up with, has changed completely. Because for the most part, these are not blokes standing on corners in a furtive, shifty fashion who are offering you a ticket for a sold-out cup game. These are people who are passing on their own ticket to somebody else, quite often not charging them. They're just giving a ticket. We're all in WhatsApp groups where somebody says, I can't go to the game on Tuesday night. Does anybody want my ticket? And somebody will go, that'd be brilliant. Thanks. I've got a mate who's coming over. The clubs are treating them as touts. That's where fans are getting upset. Whereas a fan is saying, well, I own this ticket. It should be my right to give it to somebody else if I can't make the game.
That's right. I think, I'm trying to give a balanced viewpoint.
Of course.
Certainly Brighton If I've got family, I've got grandchildren. You know my personal circumstances. Certainly, there have been times over the course of the last couple of years where football has not been a priority at a particular point in time. If I give, there's a bloke 3 doors down the road. He likes Brighton. He's not got a season ticket. Doesn't particularly want to go and pay 40 or 50 quid to go and watch them as well. So, I might offer him the ticket. The club says you've got to go and put it on the ticket exchange. Sometimes the ticket exchange isn't operating because the club hasn't sold enough tickets itself. And the club will say to me, well, you're denying us the opportunity to sell a ticket. But I'm saying, well, hold on. You're the people that have changed the kickoff time from 3 o'clock on a Saturday to 7 p.m. on a Friday or 12:30 or a Sunday or a Monday night. And that's why you're not selling the tickets because, let's be honest, neither Brighton nor Palace are, for want of a phrase, big enough teams to be able to go and sell out every single game. Because if it is, no disrespect to say Wolverhampton or Bournemouth, they're not the opposition aren't particularly attractive. The kickoff time's been changed, especially if something arises last minute. There's no opportunity to sell the tickets via the exchange because the exchange isn't operating. So my view is that surely if I give it to my neighbour, and I'm not interested in money, I bought my season ticket and we buy season tickets at open risk. He's more likely to go. If he goes there, he'll have a couple of pints, have a pie. The club's making money through that vehicle, and the clubs always say that we try to maintain that. So I think the clubs want to have their cake and eat it. There are some horrible touts out there, by the way. So we're not targeting those. I think it's individuals who sometimes get caught up in this and are being criminalised in the same way as the professional touts that makes you upset. Now, in the case of these 75 people with lifetime bans, we don't know whether it's they've had warnings in the past. We don't know the individual circumstances, or we don't know whether they are a part of professional touting gangs. All I would say is that from my knowledge of professional touts, and we'd like to have the secret tout come on the show, but by definition, and we do have a secret tout. When we're in contact, he says, we'll take on whatever measures the clubs have, but whether it's through burner phones, whether it's through the use of technology, it's in a broadly similar way to the secret Fire Stick seller. The technology is very much a game of whack-a-mole.
Yes, sadly, the only time I get in touch with our secret tout is when I need a ticket for a cup game. Anecdotally, Kieran, as well, fans are beginning to get very upset at emails from the club. If the fact that the club knows that you didn't use your season ticket is slightly sinister. And the first email says, everything all right? We noticed you didn't turn up on Saturday. And then the second email is, if you don't turn up again, we want our season ticket back. Fans don't like that. You mentioned Palace, Kieran. Our next story takes us there. And another step in the never-ending story of the sale of John Textor's minority stake in Crystal Palace.
Yes, it looks now as if we have a potential bidder in the case of something called Sportsbank now, that's being fronted by a guy called Keith Harris. Not that Keith Harris, the one that we're thinking of. I can just imagine Orville as an eagle. That'd be quite cool, actually. But Keith Harris is what you might call a broker. He's an introducer. He's a networker. And what he's managed to do is to find Sportsbank, which I think is sort of backed by a couple of Palace fans, which is a positive in my view. And it would appear that John Textor's 46% stake in Crystal Palace is going for somewhere in the region of 200 to 230 million pounds. Now, given that Textor paid 90 million pounds for it, that would represent a very significant profit. I think it's reflective of the fact that the Premier League valuation model is very, very buoyant at present, and all clubs are are leveraging on the back of that. Where Textor will take his money next is another matter. He's now being linked with Watford, but we will wait and see. I don't know where he's going to end up. I think the sooner he's out of Crystal Palace, the better for all concerned. He very much burnt his, as an outsider, and I'm not saying this because I'm a Brighton fan or your Palace and so on. As an outsider, the things he said about Everton when he was still the owner or part owner of Crystal Palace were just crass. Ill-judged is the politest way you can describe them, but what on earth possessed him to do that? And he is one of those individuals who seems to talk first and think later. But clearly there's a breakdown in the relationship between him and the rest of the Palace ownership, and therefore to have sort of continuity and people rowing in the same direction, the quicker he's out and somebody else is in, the better.
Two things, Kieran. I'm quite pleased with this because I get to use the word extrapolating, which I very rarely get to use in everyday life. So extrapolating from that figure offered for the 45% stake, that would value Palace at around £500 million. Is that a fair value?
Yes, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said that was expensive. But 3 years ago, Newcastle United was sold for £300 million, which is increasingly looking like a bargain, given the volume of buyers. Ultimately, you're looking at an industry where there's a fixed number of clubs for sale. There's a maximum of 20 clubs in the Premier League for sale at any one time. But demand has certainly increased because people have seen the profits which are being made at the exit route. And that's attracting more people into football, as well as the success of the Premier League in total. So I don't think that £500 million is excessive for Palace. They've got an established position as far as Premier League membership is concerned. There's the potential to expand the stadium. There's the London factor. I think there's a lot of positives. You've now moved to a Category 1 academy. If I was on the sales side, these would be all of the things that I would be pitching to a prospective buyer. So therefore, £500 million is not an unreasonable fee to ask.
Well, that brings me to my second point, because Keith Harris, Kieran, much as I would love purely for entertainment value pre-match to see a small, fluffy, green, budgie doll ripped apart by a confused real eagle, it's not that Keith Harris. But yes. What I don't understand, as I have to say, as a Palace fan, as a football fan, is that when John Textor has been saying in public quite loudly that the worst thing he ever did was to buy only a 45% stake in Crystal Palace, why would somebody else buy a 45% stake in Crystal Palace when it's clear historically that the other three owners are voting as a bloc? So therefore, you're buying something, it seems, over which you have no influence.
Well, you do have influence. I mean, if it turns out that sports banks owners, if their views are in alignment with Steve Parish and the two other owners, then what you will now have is owners that can work in concert. The problem with having a split ownership is it's a bit like being in a band where they start to fall out over the contents of the next album. And then things start to get messy. And the band breaks up and the album doesn't go ahead. I think the problem that Palace have is that because you've got effectively 2 or 3 ownership groups not operating in concert, is that you can't have a decision, right, we need £100 million put into the club to help fund the new stadium, to help fund the new stand. Let's all work. We think that it should be this size of stand, this amount of money needed, we'll do that on proportion. Because Textor wants something different, you've got an immediate fallout and you can't progress. If the new owners happen to be in concert as far as their views are concerned with the future of Crystal Palace, then having a split ownership group can work. I mean, my personal view, and I've said this many times, the best form of ownership is that of benign dictatorship. And as the United States will be finding out, that the benign is the most important part of that particular phrase.
So, does the fact then that Sportsbank, who have apparently made an offer, imply that they are in line with the values of Steve Parish and the other owners? Will indeed they have spoken to Steve Parish and Donna and Blitzen about their potential investment in John Textor's stake?
Well, one would imagine so, even if it's sort of indirectly, because if you're going to work within any organisation, you've got to do your homework as to who you're working with. It all ultimately it all comes down to relationships. Why are we still doing this show after 5 years? It's because we've got a relationship in terms of you, me, and producer Guy, where we each know that we bring something different to the table, but there is ultimately a coherent set of values in terms of what we believe in as far as the show is concerned. Why do we constantly turn down the opportunity for this to be a well-known betting organisation's price of football? It's because it would go against our values.
Yeah, because I keep getting outvoted 2-1. That's not true. We've had several offers from high-profile gambling companies that would have made us very happy, but we turned them down, Kieran, much as we turned down those podcast prizes. I say we turn them down. But now, we had a question on our last questions pods, Kieran, which enabled you to explain in some detail how you write off loans by converting them into shares. And as if by magic, as an example, Fulham have just done that very thing.
That's right. The Fulham owner, Shahid Khan, has a very expensive toy at Craven Cottage. And to be fair to him, he has regularly converted loans into shares. Now, that makes it sound as if there's some sort of logic to it. Actually, he's writing off the loans because previously he owned 100% of Fulham Football Club and had loans as well. By converting the loans into shares, he still has exactly the same in the form of 100% of Fulham Football Club. I think the intriguing thing is in the light of the Manchester City case against the Premier League, where associated party loans were very much seen as a victory from City's perspective and resulted in the new rules which were introduced by the Premier League effectively be deemed to be anti-competitive and illegal. This is one route or one potential solution that owners could take, although why they should be forced to take that, given that ultimately it's up to them how they choose to invest in a club, is a personal choice. Why does Fulham Football Club owe so much money to the owner? The answer is simple. It's a loss-making club, along with the vast majority of football clubs. And in getting promoted a couple of seasons, 2 or 3 seasons ago, back to the Premier League, that cost Fulham, it worked out as around about £1.4 million a week in losses. Those losses were underwritten by the owner in the form of loans, and he's now said, "Look, you're never going to be in a position to repay me. Let's not pretend that you owe me the money. I'm just going to convert it into shares."
Kieran, I'm aware that we still have quite a few stories to get through, and you have to be somewhere. So I'm going to stop waffling so much, trying to make people laugh, and we'll crack through these stories. And we also have. I shouldn't say this out loud, Kieran, but there's no other way of telling you. Don't forget we've got to do the introduction to our interview from Mark Ives, who I wasn't going to mention again. So let's start this sprint with 2 clubs that have made a loss of similar amounts of money, one north and one south of the border.
That's right. Well, first of all, we've got Norwich City in the Championship. They lost £14 million in 23-24. Norwich are always very good at getting their accounts out quickly. It's partly due to the fact that they're a PLC as opposed to a private company. Those losses would have been much, much higher had it not been for the fact that they've got parachute payments. And the parachute payments have stopped as far as the current season is concerned. And that means that Norwich's revenues are going to be down probably somewhere in the region of £35 million this year, which will be, it's not half of their total income, but it's certainly a very significant percentage. Now, they do have a new owner in Mark Atanasio. Even so, he will have looked at the numbers and realised this isn't good, because if they've not managed to get their wage bill down this season, then the losses for 24-25, I think, will be eye-watering. They could be forced to sell players in order to be compliant with PSR, which means, of course, that they need to get promoted, as does, of course, 23 clubs at least in the Championship. So that's where they are. They have been very good at player trading in the past. Player trading model wasn't so good in 23-24. The other club, when we go north of the border, is Rangers. Now, I said sort of 2 or 3 years ago, I think the year that Rangers got to the final of the Europa League, that they potentially could become very competitive with Celtic. But since then, Celtic have accelerated and Rangers, I think to a certain extent, have gone into reverse. So they've also announced losses in the region of that same figure. But they've got no chairman. John Bennett, who has quit. He's got health issues. They've got no CEO. They've got no cash. They had £1 million in their bank accounts at the end of the season, compared to Celtic having 70. Celtic are doing really well in the Champions League. They've made a very, very solid start. They've got a very good chance now of getting into the knockout phase, which will further accelerate the difference. In Scotland, if you want to make money, then you've got to be able to sell players. And what Celtic have been very, very good at is each season they've sold normally one player for somewhere in the region of 15 to 25 million pounds. That's generated profits. That's allowed them to have the pick in terms of who comes to Scotland. Rangers have come from a long way back following the issues in 2012 and so on. They had made some progress. That progress has stalled. Trying to find positives from their accounts. Revenue is a record level. They've had a lot of litigation. I think they settled all of their litigation, which is good. But then you have to ask yourself, how did they get themselves into so many lawsuits in the first place? That sometimes you can be over-combative in terms of your relationships, and also, why did you get into those relationships in the first place? So off the pitch, they are a long way behind Celtic. And I know Rangers fans don't want to hear that, because Glasgow's a city where being second, or Scottish football is a city where being second is being nowhere as far as those two clubs are concerned. And it's difficult to see how that can be reversed unless there is a lot of fresh investment. But when you've got a shareholder base which appears to be quite fractured and divisive, I think that's going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah, and just to placate angry Aberdeen fans, Kieran, who'll be listening to this, it doesn't help Rangers that almost out of nowhere a third team has come along to split the Glasgow pair, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, and Aberdeen have done superbly this season as far as the SPFL was concerned. But last weekend they were beaten 6-0 by Celtic in the semi-finals of the Cup, which again shows sort of the gulf. And I look at the finances. Celtic are generating 5 times as much revenue as what you might call the other clubs, the clubs from, like Aberdeen and those from Edinburgh and so on. And it means that how those clubs can bridge the gap is an almost impossible challenge.
When we do our live shows, Kieran, I sometimes think our audience don't believe me when I say to them that you don't know the questions that that I'm going to ask you beforehand. We ask at half time, at the interval, as we call it in our industry, because we like to use words like that. When we get questions from the audience, you don't know them. which is remarkable. But there was one we had at our last show in Balham, which was basically what the hell's happening at Blyth Spartans. And I saw that question. I thought, well, Kieran's going to struggle there. But no, of course you didn't. You knew exactly what was happening at Blyth Spartans, and you gave a very good answer. And there's been progress since then.
There's been change since then.
Okay.
Blyth Spartans do have new owners. The new owners are in the form of a community interest club, which on the face of it looks good. A CIC, as these things are known, effectively says we now have an ownership group whose ambitions are not to make profit. The nature of being a limited company is that you are a profit maximizer. You are, in theory at least. I appreciate in football it doesn't work. I'm going to be completely transparent here. The first thing that they did was that they sacked the manager, David Stockdale. And he went on social media. I know David. I've taught David. David's a really good guy. And they appear to have sacked him without honouring the remainder of his contract by saying, well, your contract was with the old company as opposed to the new organisation, so therefore we're not going to pay you up in terms of what you're entitled to and so on. So, yeah, it's good in the sense that if you've got a new ownership group, but if the first thing that they're going to do is to not honour old contracts, then it does make you slightly twitchy. But it is a new ownership group. The club was losing money. Just so we can talk about practically every club as far as the show is concerned today, with the exception of Celtic. And we wish them all the best. But I always judge people by how they treat people. And in my view, they've not made a very nice start. Now, I might be slightly biased because I've known David.
It's a story we'll keep an eye on, but it's funny. Blyth Spartans are one of those clubs that always get mentioned when the first round of the FA Cup comes knocking, isn't it? Because they're a famous giant killing club. On the other side of the country, Kieran, Morecambe are inching towards new owners.
Yes.
Oh dear, I did not like this. The pause and then the sigh is always a worrying sign, Kieran.
Well, the art of saying nothing can sometimes be through saying something. And Morecambe, sadly, have been on this show far too often with regards to the challenges that they have. They're at the wrong end of League Two. They did fantastically well to get out of the National League and into League Two. And it would be great if there was an opportunity for perhaps 3 teams every season to get out of the National League into League Two. I wonder if there's somebody we could talk to about that. Because I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah, he got quite feisty about that, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Rightly so. It is Division 5.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. It's Division 5 if you look at the quality of the product and how clubs have managed to establish themselves in League 2 on many an occasion. So with regards to Morecambe, what they've said is that, we're the owners. Yes, we are in discussions with somebody, and those discussions are making progress. When the Shrimp Trust gets in contact with the EFL say, and they can't say any more than this. They're effectively bound by confidentiality. We cannot comment as to whether there's been any progress made with the prospective new owner. Now, progress could be there's been 1 email sent in the last 3 months between the two parties. Well, that's some form of progress. I've been trying to buy an apartment in Liverpool for the last, I had an offer accepted an apartment in Liverpool 18 months ago. If I contact my solicitor and they say, there's been progress, we've received 1 more email. Well, that's not allowing me to actually go and find somewhere to live, as opposed to going from hotel to hotel every week. So, how you define or measure progress is far more difficult. And given the history of the owners and their relationship with the club, I just have developed what I would refer to as a healthy scepticism because I'm not a cynic. So therefore, instead, I'm a healthy sceptic.
Yeah, that's nice.
With regards to pronouncements.
Well, at least you're a healthy sceptic, Kieran. That's good. It's one below cynic, isn't it? This is a slightly odd one. New investors at Wrexham, Kieran.
Yes, Wrexham have sold probably around about 10 to 15% of the club. Why? Because it's a fantastic brand. It's got the association with Reynolds and McElhenney, and to a certain extent, they're cashing out. They've put money into the club. The TV program is fantastic. They've now got the likes of United Airlines and TikTok and Aviation Gin and big brands supporting them. They're also involved with Meta, the Facebook people and the metaverse people. So the value of the club has increased. There is a stated ambition to try to get to the Premier League, which is laudable. Should they get to the Championship, I think they will find the step up from League One to Championship is very significant. But as we've seen with Ipswich Town and Luton Town, that can be dealt with very, very quickly. But my view of the Championship, you've just got to look at Sunderland, Leeds United, Derby County, the two Sheffield teams, Borough, QPR. There are very, very big clubs from all around the country, and that's not disrespecting Norwich or anybody else that are there as well. You are entering a completely different environment in terms of crowds, in terms of finances, and so on. But I would imagine, again, if I was on the sales side of the deal, what I'd be pitching, you've got a fantastic brand. You're now two tiers away from the Premier League with all of the riches that brings. And as we saw with Ipswich, they would manage to sell a small proportion of the club and get a financial return on that, which allows the club to accelerate further.
What I wonder, Kieran, given the nature of the good news story that is Wrexham, is why they're selling shares in the first place. I mean, 10 to 15% is a reasonably substantial chunk of shares, and you use the phrase cashing out. Does that imply that Reynolds and McElhenney would be open to selling more shares?
I think they would be willing to sell up to 49% of the shares, if I'm honest. If other people want to ride the wave, which is Wrexham, and let's face it, it is a fantastic success story, and for a town which has had a lot of negative blows over the course of the last 30 to 40 years, this is absolutely fantastic in terms of the increased profile of Wrexham as a town. And I've been, I've worked there in my insolvency days, and people are great. The times were tough. So, if the price is right, there's always somebody willing to do a deal. And for me, my main concern was Reynolds and McElhenney are part of the identity of the football club. So what you wouldn't want is for them to do a deal in which they walk away, because I think some of the positives can be still leveraged off over the next few years with them in charge, because the TV program is a great marketing tool for not just the football club but the people of the town itself, and that would diminish should they sell out altogether. But to sell a minority stake and to allow others to provide additional funding to expand the stadium, to expand facilities, I think there's a lot of positives through going down that route, because they're Hollywood stars. That means that they're, by footballing standards, they're not actually particularly wealthy.
Okay, fair point. As a PS to the Wrexham story, Kieran, they've made a purchase that I think I approve of.
That's right. Wrexham Lager has been acquired. There was a Wrexham brewery, and it's good that they are buying into local businesses. It's certainly something which was, again, very evident when I used to go to Wrexham as a fan. Not that I drink, but it's good that they are buying into local brands as well as having association with global brands. And one would imagine that the stardust that they will sprinkle upon the product, which could potentially allow for increased sales in terms of online sales and so on. To have a McElhenney or Reynolds branded product there can only help.
imagine my concern, Kieran, back in the day when my first proper agent contacted me and said, I've bought a pub, which of course I was highly delighted about, until it turns out they'd bought the pub and then had it turned into a house. It's just, I still never quite recovered. Our penultimate story, Kieran, takes us to Nottingham, who are having a fantastic season, Forest anyway, in the Premier League. But their owner, Kieran, I think it's fair to say we can use the word colourful. But he's found himself in court this week.
Well, he has, because Marinakis has been on the receiving end of a number of accusations, which we won't go into in detail.
No,
I think
please don't.
Although the nature of the accusations have been publicised in the Athletic, so I think this is Daniel Taylor of the Athletic came up with this story. He feels that there is a smear campaign against him to damage his reputation, and he is suing for effectively defamation of character in terms of his history, which isn't actually connected to Nottingham Forest Football Club, but is there's been accusations in respect of matches taking place back in Greece. There's been accusations with regards to his other business, which he comes from a shipping background. It's always, somebody in shipping. It's always a Greek shipping magnate, isn't it? And you don't get that word magnate used in very many other industries. But if you get Greek, it has to be shipping, not owner, not success. It's always magnate, and therefore he is defending himself, and it appears to be against somebody from another Greek club, which again feisty is to put it quite mildly. Tends to be the relationship. We do actually have, and people might be saying I'm making this up, we do actually have a secret Greek football manager or ex-Greek football manager. And the tales that he has told me about Greek football were A, fantastic, and B, would ensure that we would never go on air again.
Yeah, we couldn't even say them live at some of the live gigs, Kieran. To be perfectly honest. I always refer to Swiss Ramble as a financial podcast magnate. It's the only other time I use that word. Our final story, Kieran. Forbes has listed their top 10 highest paid footballers. Any surprises on there?
Not really. It will come as no great piece of amazement for anybody that Cristiano Ronaldo is number one with income last year of $285 million. To put that in context, that's more than either Palace or Brighton made.
Wow.
Being in the Premier League. There are 4 players from the Saudi Pro League. Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar, Benzema, Sadio Mane. Lionel Messi, of course, he pops up from the MLS. 3 players from the Premier League, Erling Haaland, Kevin De Bruyne, and Mo Salah, and 2 from Real Madrid in the form of Kylian Mbappe and Vinny Jr. So where are they making all this money from? It's because the players have, certainly if you are the like of Cristiano Ronaldo, you have now transcended the sport in the sense that it doesn't matter whether your team wins or loses, or I don't know what his team. I don't know which team name he is in the Saudi Pro League, and I don't know what position they are in the league. And honestly, it's got no great interest to me. But he sells products off the back of being Cristiano Ronaldo, irrespective of the success of the club that he plays for.
Do players mind being outed as being in the top 10 of highest paid players? Do they compete for this sort of thing, or was it the sort of information they'd prefer to keep private?
I'd imagine they would be quite pleased. It's a bit like when the annual computer games come out, and the first thing they do is go and check on their ratings in terms of acceleration, tackle success, and so on.
Yeah.
They like to you would not have got to where these players are today if you were not competitive.
Fair point.
And Kevin De Bruyne came in 10th in the list at just $39 million last year. Part of that's due to his contract, of course, but also due to the fact that he is able to partner with commercial partners as well and sponsors, but not to the same extent as Cristiano Ronaldo, because probably the most famous footballer on the planet and the second best.
I think Kevin De Bruyne is sleeping at night, isn't he? I think he's maybe not last night, obviously, in Portugal, but I think he's sleeping at night. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that'd be very kind of you. It will get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. Don't forget, we have announcements imminent about some of the new services we can provide for you, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter X. You can find us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to buy our book, which is just out in paperback, you can go to a bookshop, or you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Tuesday with our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thanks as always. If you want to actually put a face on the podcast, come and see us at Brighton Utilitarian Church on Friday, the 15th of November. There's a handful of tickets still remaining. All of the proceeds are going to Brighton Samaritans. We're in November. There's not a lot to be happy about. So, come across from America. You're welcome. You need cheering up, I would say, and come across. And we're doing a show. It's a great fun show. It's broadly like having two podcasts back to back. The first of which we'll be going through some of the latest news stories, and secondly, we will be answering your questions on the night. You don't have to go and wait 10 to 12 months before they get answered. You'll get answered on the night. And Kevin's absolutely right. I don't know the questions in advance, which does make for slightly squeaky bum time. But we always do our very best to answer. We are hopeful of having a guest. The guest who I did have planned coming on the show who was Gary O'Reilly, the former Crystal Palace and Brighton player. So I contacted Gary because I've been reliably informed that he was still living in Brighton. But he replied to me last night and says, "No, I've moved to America. You might want to consider moving back, Gary." But we're still hopeful of getting a guest, and we'll be able to announce that in the next few days. But the show stands on its own 2 feet as well, and it's great fun. And you'll be contributing towards a fantastic cause. Who my friend Dean, who I'm doing this with from Samaritans. We'll be having a chat with him up on stage as to the work that they do, and my hat is permanently tipped as in their direction.
Yeah, it might be for the best that Gary O'Reilly's not doing it. Just a room full of surly Brighton fans listening to me and Gary O'Reilly talk through his goal in the 1990 FA Cup semi-final, because we know the club he really loves. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.